Hello and welcome to another CS200 lecture, a mini lecture. This time we're going to talk about scope of a variable and method. So what a scope refers to is when a particular variable, or they call it method item, is visible to part of a program. So the example they give here is in this height converter, they have cmval, and cmval is declared inside of the height feet to cm method. And once it's declared, it can be used. But its utility, in other words, when it can be accessed, ends when that curly brace, this one here, shows up. So that says that cmval is no longer accessible. So for example, if this was part of a nested loop and we declared this inside the nested loop, it would only be valid while we can have access to it. Let me show you an example of when a particular variable has access. So we have a simple class called myClass, and we've declared main. We have x defined here is equal to 100. So we have a block that starts here and ends here. You can see it's kind of has a gray border because BlueJ puts that in for us. So we cannot use x up here above the block. We cannot use it below the block. And the only place we can use it is after we declared it. So for example, here, we could not use it. So if we compile this and run it, we should get here, we should see the value 100, which is expected. But if we try to print this out, say, for example, here, and compile it, it's going to give us an error. And the error, by hitting the compile button again, it says it can't find the symbol. It doesn't know where x is. But there's a couple of ways around this. Of course, using a field variable is what we talk about in this chapter. A field variable would be to declare it, the variable up here. And in that case, we could have access to it, but it would give us a different value. So keep in mind, this is our method. So this is the block that we have scope of x. So here we're referring to it outside of scope. However, what if we made this a field variable, meaning we declare it outside of the class, inside the class, but outside of the method and outside of the block. So let's put a value here. We have 100 here. Let's put 50. And you're going to see we're going to get an error here because it says it's not static, right? So let's take a look here. It says non-static variable. So when we declare it here, we have to put the keyword static in here. And now it should work fine, okay? So we have 50 here, and then let's declare another x inside of main, right? And we're going to call it 75. Okay, so if we compile it, what do you think we're going to have happen? We're probably going to get an error because it's saying you can't declare the same variable twice. So, however, we can get away with this, where we've got static int x equals 50. And let's put this in a couple of times. In fact, actually, let me make some modifications, which I've done in another class. So let's go to my class 2. And my class 2 has x equals 50. And then, of course, we do a print line at 1. So we're doing it before we declare the variable inside of the block. We do at 2, which is inside the same block, right? Because here we're ending the block. Then we do it at 3, which is outside of this block. So we have 50 as our field variable for x. We have 100, which is declared inside of this block, but after the first print line. And then we end the block, and then we print it again. So what we should see here is at the first one, we see x equals 50 because we haven't set this one yet. Because this is in the same block as where we've declared x equal to 100, we will get an answer of 100 here. But to show you that this variable, this x here, disappears, and the field variable is the one that gets displayed, we should see a 50 here. So let's go ahead, compile it. Compile's fine. We close it. Let's run it and see what we get. Okay. First of all, let's make sure we have. Okay. So here's what we get. Just like we would expect. At 1 it's 50. At 2 it's 100. And then because we exited the block, at 3 it goes back to 50. So this shows the scope of what we can do inside of our program and our method. So that's why the control block is important for scope. Another thing that we want to call attention to is even though we have our main here, this is from the text. We're calling a method, but you can see here the method is defined after in a sequential or linear order. We're defining it after it's being called. Now, one would think that what we've seen is that it gives an error, but that's not true about methods, and here's why. As long as it's in the same class, it should work fine, because what happens is the class evaluates all the references, like it would evaluate the method name and realize that it's a valid method name with the right signature. When we talk about signature, we mean it has the same parameters in the same order. Because of that, this allows us to actually run this code and get results, even though we're using something before it's defined linearly. So I'm going to go ahead here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear this, and let's take a look at the code. This is the same code that we've got given to us in the text. So let's compile it. No problems. So let's run it. And remember, when we have interaction, we type our input here, even though it's displaying up here. So I'm going to put 5 feet 7 inches, and that's equal to 170 centimeters. So going back to the program itself, we can actually see that we call it after we define it. But how Java recognizes it is that it solves this reference before it actually runs the. The next topic to cover is method name overloading. So one of the nice things about Java and many of the languages like C++ is you can overload the name. You may think, well, why do I even care? Why would I even do that? Let's just say you get information that comes in different formats. Let's say, for example, you have first name, last name, and some people have a middle name, some people have a suffix to their name. So there's many different formats a name could come in, right? So you can have first, middle, last suffix, first, last, or if you're like Cher or Sting or Madonna or Prince, you might just have a single name. So this gives us the flexibility of reading in all sorts of different data types and having it work. So we can have different methods for each of these. So one of the examples they give here is this one called date printer. So in this example, you have one called datePrint here, and then you have another one that's in this orange here called datePrint as well. So let's go to BlueJ and let's take a look. So I've got datePrinter up here, and you can see it's pretty straightforward. I've changed the dates here to reflect Tuesday's date, but you can see it's much like what we see in the textbook. The nice thing here is we have int current day, int current month, int current year. So the three parameters this datePrint is expecting is different than the three parameters this datePrint is expecting. So Java is smart enough to realize that whatever we pass it, we are going to be using that particular format and that particular method. So it may seem strange, but this compiles just fine, even though we've got two methods with the same name. So we close it. Let's clear out this. And now if we run our datePrint method, we can see the results show us what happens when we call the first method and we call the second method. And the nice thing is we can call each of these methods, so we have a lot of flexibility in how we want to send dates. This is important when we get to what we call method overloading. So we can even overload different methods that are established methods, like the print method. But we won't get to that this early in the course. So here's another one where you can overload a different salutation, and then we have one, right, hello person's name. Then we need to have another one to handle another situation. So we have to have two different ones, print salutations, to handle the two different inputs that we expect. So if we have one argument or two, we get the results that we want. So here is the height to inches, and you can see here we may have two different arguments. So we need to have a method that has two different parameters and then another one that has one. I'll leave this one for you to do. So if you have any questions, these are topics that we're going to see more often, because they're actually some of the benefits of using a language like Java, is we have a lot of control over what our methods look like and how many parameters we can send it.